Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I guess I want to understand what exactly do you mean? What am I supposed to be proving you wrong about here?
Well, if you can give me evidence of God, that'd be great.
Okay. So I guess your proposition is that you need evidence to believe in something being possible.
I need evidence to believe in God. Do you have any evidence for God?
Is it only specifically God that you need evidence to believe, or are there other things that you don't need evidence to believe in?
There's everything I believe has some evidence behind it.
Some evidence.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of reasons I guess I personally believe, but I guess one that would convince me the most would be the argument of coming from free will. I don't think it is possible to have free will in the absence of some type of supernatural creator. And my experience tells me that I am capable of making decisions, and for that reason, I have to go to the what follows, which is that it's given to us from someplace else. Otherwise, we couldn't have free will.
Yeah. First of all, I reject that we have free will, but
Okay.
you can still believe in God and think that the universe is determined. I don't see the connection between free will and God.
Well,
I
I
think
could explain why I do think there's a
you're
connection.
implying that there's some kind of perhaps immaterial like motivator that causes us to do things or decide things, but that will be deterministic. If you think there's a soul, well, what causes the soul to operate the way it does? What is free will? This is a very deep question. What really is free will?
Yep.
To me, it's either determined because there's a set of causes prior to what we're doing now, or it's just a random universe. In that sense, there is no free will. It's just things happening that are beyond our control. So, what do you mean by free will, and how does this mean God exists?
So by free will, I mean the capability of making your own decision that is not activated by uh, the materials that construct a person, but rather by something more intrinsic. You could say this is a spirit or a soul, something above the physical realm. And I think that we
And what
need
causes
something
the
above.
soul? And what causes the soul to operate?
Well, the soul would have come from something greater, and this thing that is greater would grant the soul the ability to operate because it gives it permission to.
Right. So we're just puppets to God.
No,
We're
that
not
no,
free.
that's
We're puppets.
no, because if we were puppets, God would be making us do the things that He wants us to do, aka all the rules that He puts in the Old Testament for us to abide by, and He doesn't. We don't do those things. If it were the case, we'd
There's a
all be doing
difference
them.
between giving us a set of laws and saying, "Hey, don't do these things," and creating a world where we have no other option but to do what we do.
Well, we do
And
have an option.
well, that's not apparent to me. I don't think we have options that are free
Okay,
to choose. I think we are determined in every sense, and I don't see
okay.
reason to think a soul solves this or
Well,
God solves this. I think
I think
we can still have determinism be true, yet God be true.
well, unfortunately, I think if everybody held your worldview, society wouldn't even function. I mean, if we actually went through with this idea that determinism was real and that free will really wasn't real, nobody is truly, responsible for their actions. I mean, we shouldn't be throwing anybody in prison. We shouldn't be actually holding anybody accountable for their actions if there is no free will. It's only because of the idea that people who make laws and people who actually form society assume that we have free will that we're actually able to
Yeah,
punish these people.
there you go. Exactly correct. We assume we have free will, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with assuming responsibilities. There's nothing.
Yeah,
What's
but
wrong with that?
under your worldview,
That's why
that
we
assumption
function.
isn't even their choice.
Well, who cares if it's our choice or not? We assume it is, and that in that sense, it's a fully workable world. It's a fully runnable
I don't
society.
think it is because
Well, it's
because
sir. Look. If I design a robot, and that robot I program to, you
we're not
know,
robots.
to destroy people, to kill, to schmurder somebody. If I program that robot to schmurder, it has no choice but to schmurder. But does that mean because
100%.
the robot? Hold on. If I put this robot out into the world and it starts schmurdering people, does that mean we shouldn't assume it has responsibility and just let it go and continue murder? No, we would stop it. We would still punish the robot, even though the robot is
Yeah,
deterministic.
and punishing the robot
That's
isn't your actual decision. That's also just predestined too. So
yeah. And where's the problem in this? Everything's determined. What's the problem?
the problem is that you can't simultaneously have that worldview and believe that what a person is doing is genuinely wrong and be disgusted by that person. For example,
Why can't we
if
say it's
pedophiles
wrong?
exist,
Why can't we
if
say it's wrong?
because it's not that person's fault. They were just doing the things that they were determined to do.
Doesn't make it.
No, the
First
action
of
was
all,
wrong. The action was wrong, but the person is not
hold
wrong in
on,
your worldview.
hold on. We can still designate certain people as being at fault because they're the most immediate actions. They're the most immediate mediums in which those actions are being caused. So, yes, even though there isn't this intrinsic fault, you can still deem that some people are at fault in certain circumstances because they're the ones doing it. And again, we can still punish people. We can still put them in jail to do something wrong. We can still say it is wrong because we don't want those actions to continue happening.
Yeah,
And
but it wasn't their fault
to
though.
prevent them, we punish them. There's
How do
nothing
you
wrong.
well, how are you going? Okay, so the idea of the justice system is that you're trying to make sure that people don't commit crimes by saying, "Oh, if you do commit this crime, you will be put in jail." It isn't under your worldview. That doesn't even make sense because we don't even have the choice of committing the crime to begin with.
Well, we make choices, but the choices are determined. And again, just because what we do is determined doesn't mean that there can't be law.
Self-defeating. So we make choices, but those choices are self-determined.
Those choices are determined by the laws of nature.
Okay. See, I'm more convinced that there is a free will because if there is a free will, then I can be disgusted by somebody's abhorrent actions. I can be disgusted by pedophiles.
Sir, you can still be disgusted if
No,
everything's
no, you
determined.
can't be disgusted because being
no,
disgusted
no,
isn't
no,
your
no,
choice because there is no free will.
You're hold on. You're confusing the notion that you can't be disgusted with. It doesn't seem intuitive to me that it'd be disgusting. You're assuming that we don't have free will, and because of that, you're assuming that we do have free will, and because of that, you're saying, well, my view is unintuitive. Well, okay, but I'm sorry, sir. Just because something is unintuitive doesn't mean it can't happen. And that's why, although it's not intuitive, it is still, to me, the case that we are deterministic, fully deterministic, and we still deterministically feel things are right or wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that world. It's just a little weird and uncomfortable to conceive.
Yeah, I think to believe in something like that, that's harder to believe than a God. That's almost like supernatural. What you're telling me feels more fantasy than what I'm believing, in my opinion. I mean, that's crazy.
Sir, you believe in an immaterial, magical soul that
It's not magical.
No, that's magic. What's not magic is the fact
No,
that we are
what's
determined.
magic is that we're all just doing things that aren't, that we have no control over, and that we're doing them. You're in this TikTok call right now that you have no choice of actually starting. You didn't start this. You just you were determined to start this.
Okay, and look at why we say this. Because everything we do is caused by what? Our brains, our thoughts. If I desire something, I do it. And that can't be controlled. I cannot control what my brain's doing, can I?
So you can't control your thoughts?
No, I cannot control my thoughts.
I can control my thoughts.
No, there is an apparent sense of controlling your thoughts, but
you're assuming
how about
that.
this? Don't think of a unicorn. Don't think of an elephant. What did you think of? An elephant. We are stimulated by our environments. We are largely determined by what people say to us, what we learn, exterior stimulants. We are largely determined by the outside world, and that's how the brain works. The brain is just a series of chemical phenomenon happening, and we are enacting those responses in the real world, and that's what we're doing. We're the most immediate actions. that
Okay.
reflect you. So
I'm almost curious to see if this is an extension of your belief. Let's say you your being or your brain, your who you are. Let's say you didn't grow up in your body. You didn't grow up, in your way to live with your parents. Let's say you grew up in mine. You had my parents. You had everything that I had. Would you turn out exactly the same as me, or would you turn out differently?
of course, I would be like you.
Exactly
Everything's
the same.
determined. Yes,
But see,
if
I
I
think
was
that's
you, I'd
that's
be you.
ridiculous to believe. You can't believe
If
it.
I
How
was,
can you believe in something like that?
well, why is it wrong to believe in that?
Because that means that me and you aren't actually different people. You're just determined by what is around you. You're not actually
Yeah,
different from me.
exactly. We are still different people. We're just determined differently.
So your being is wholly 100% determined by the situation and environment around you.
Correct.
Okay. And so that means if your being, let's say grew up, okay, let's say who's that Jeffrey Dahmer. Let's say you grew up in Jeffrey Dahmer's body. You had all of his experiences and all of his life. That means you'd turn out to be a murderer too.
Okay, and
Yeah. Well,
I
I
don't
really
see
hope
what's
that
funny,
you.
sir.
Okay,
If I
if
was
you
a
say
chair,
so.
if I was a chair, I'd be a chair. If I was Jeffrey Dahmer, I'd be Jeffrey Dahmer.
No, 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 no. I didn't say that.
If I
I
was
said if you grew
Godzilla,
up in Jeffrey Dahmer's body and you just had his experiences and his.
yes, yes. If I
That's
grew
what
up,
you. So
if
why are
I
you? So
grew
why
up
are you so
just
mad
like Jeffrey
at? So why are
Dahmer,
you so mad at
sure.
Jeffrey Dahmer then? What's so bad about what Jeffrey Dahmer does? If you would have done it, if you were in his situation.
Because that action is something that we don't want to happen. Therefore, we think it's wrong. That's it. You're overthinking.
I think no. I think you're drastically overthinking this. I think what you're thinking is way
No
more
way.
complicated than what I'm thinking.
Well, okay. Where is the soul? How do you know there's a soul?
Well, I'm arguing from the point that if I do have free will, it is far more logical to believe that there is a soul.
Where?
That's what
Okay. So then, where is the soul then? I mean, if the soul could be disturbed, is shown, then that'd be evidence of free will in your
no,
view. So where
because
is the
no, because
soul?
if a soul could be shown, then it wouldn't be a soul. The whole point of a soul is that it's an immaterial. So,
Okay. So now you have something that is completely unfalsifiable, completely not being able to be shown to be true. You can't believe what you believe and be honest.
well, it's, excuse me if I'm wrong, but you're doing the exact same thing I'm doing. You're believing and determine. You can't prove determinism. You couldn't prove that.
Well, we can give evidence towards
Okay.
it. We can show people that, for example, there's a lot of neurological tests where people have we've studied the brain and we look at the brain with fMRI and we can see that their thoughts occur way before their actions, and and specifically their choices are determined way before their actions, seconds before they actually do it. Their brain is thinking of doing it. And
Yeah,
that's evidence that we don't really control what we're
no,
doing.
I disagree with. I mean, I think the exact same way. Sure, when I do something, I think about it before I do it. Doesn't mean that I didn't make the choice to do it or to
Well,
start
that's
thinking
the
about it.
point. Those thoughts are determined. Those thoughts, my
That
brain,
to me
I
isn't
cannot.
evidence that there's
Sure,
determinism.
look. I don't control the processes in my brain. Do I?
So I don't know. Do you?
No, we don't control our processes in our brains. Those are determined by chemistry.
Sure. I mean, I can't control the processes that are the chemical makeup of my hand, but I can move my fingers. I make the
Exactly.
decision to move my fingers.
Because you're determined to move your fingers.
And
It
what is the evidence
feels
that I'm
like
determined to move my fingers?
because your thoughts are doing it for you before you do it, but
The
you're
thoughts that I constructed to make sure that my fingers could move.
before you're conscious of moving your hand, your brain's already doing it. Your brain's already thinking of it. That's the point. What we see, what we view as the conscious world, the conscious moment that we're living in now, that is delayed.
So I think you're conflating something being
That shows that
spontaneous.
there's a cascade of processes that come prior to our most immediate actions now, and that would fit in perfectly like a puzzle piece with the notion of determinism. In other words, this series of directly causal events happening over and over in a perfect sequence, that would align perfectly with what determinism says. Whereas there's no hint or sign that I can just freely think of doing something. I can't freely become gay. I can't freely, become attracted to animals. I can't do that freely. It is something that my brain determines.
Okay, the problem that the problem that I have with this is that first I think that you're confusing. You're almost saying that because that spontaneous decision making aligns with free will, and that's not what free will is. Free, you can absolutely have a predetermined thought, or have a thought that was made before the decision. That doesn't contradict free will at all. It doesn't have to be spontaneous. I don't think that the evidence that you're giving is contradicting what I'm saying at all. And
Well,
I think
then,
that
if my thoughts are controlled by my brain, if my actions are controlled by my thoughts, then who has free will there? Who actually has free will? Where is it?
well, I think as soon as I make I think I can think of something in my head. I can think of I'm going to hurt this person. I can think that. That is me. And then I can actually make the action to do
But
it.
those
Can you not do
thoughts,
that? I
look,
can do that.
but those thoughts are determined by previous events that you don't control. Look, we are product. Ever hear this saying? We are the products of our environments. We are the products of our environments, and I believe that. I think we are products of our environments. That's why, if I grew up in your household, I'd be like you. If I
But
grew
exactly
up in
like me, like 100% like me.
so to me, that's why when I think of free will, I don't see any room for it because of how the environment has such control over our lives.
The problem is that you act as if we do have free will. See, the way you live your life
What's
is
wrong with that?
assuming my
What's
because
wrong with that?
because you throw away my worldview, but you live as if you have mine. And the thing is,
Why
I
can't we
actually hold my
look,
worldview.
look, there's a reason why. There's a reason why we think like you, but don't we act like you, but don't think like you, technically speaking. Because if we all thought that, oh, we don't have control, we evolved to not think of these really complicated logical and mathematical thoughts. We evolved to eat, have sex, that's it. So it would be impeding our progress if we all thought this way and we all were technical about what we do. We'd be super uber aware, and that wouldn't be very fruitful for our survival or our evolution. We'd be too distracted by these thoughts. However, in today's world, we now have the ability to be distracted. Okay, we have way more free time, and that's why today we have these thoughts now. But I agree with you that we don't act. We act like we have free will because it's just more convenient for us, and it's better, for our brain health or our mental health. But that doesn't mean that you're correct. It doesn't mean that you're correct. It just means we act like you're correct.
Yeah, I see. So you believe that the reason we assume we have free will is because evolution has made it so that it is less beneficial to our existence for us to assume that we are led by determinism. See, I disagree with that because I think let's assume that we evolved from millions of years. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. We probably were not assuming that we were determinism, right? We had predetermined actions right there. We were probably assuming we had free. I don't think a dog thinks its actions are predetermined. A dog assumes it has free will too.
I don't know. I'm not a dog, but I can probably say that they probably don't have
I
these
would hope
thoughts like
so.
we do. They probably are not thinking about determinism or free will.
They're probably not thinking about determinism, free will, but I don't see how evolution is pushing us to assume we have free will because that's beneficial, as opposed to just us having free will. I don't think that you really provide any evidence that supports
It's
that.
not that evolution is pushing us to believe we have free will. It's pushing us to just do things that are less energy intensive than doing what we're doing now, and that's all. We didn't evolve to have the philosophical discussions. We evolved to do way less energy intensive things like have sex and find food, eat, and sleep. And that's it. I don't know why this is so hard for people to grasp.
Because I think that they're justified in being hard to grasp it because it is a kind of ridiculous notion that we all have to, we ought to throw away, this innate sense of decision making that we have and say it's determined.
You don't have to throw it away. You don't have
Well,
to
you
throw
are
it
throwing
away.
it away.
All you have to do is realize that technically speaking, we don't have free will.
There is no you've provided no zero evidence for us having no free will
I explained to you the reasons why I
because we have
determined.
brain makeup
Because
and
we don't
this leads
have
us to have
control over
thoughts.
our thoughts or desires, and we don't
I
have control over our
yes, but
brains. And our brains are
if that were
determined by
true,
our
we wouldn't be able
environment.
to act against our desires. I mean that just doesn't make sense.
We
How
don't act against our
we
desires.
do act against our desires. We do that all the
No,
time.
because this is a conundrum. If you think that if you have a choice between a pizza and a donut, and you desire the pizza, and you desire, I'm sorry, you have two choices between pizza and a salad, and you desire the pizza, but something in your brain says, wait a minute, I better eat the salad because it's going to be healthier for you. So you desire the pizza. However, your brain still determines you to get the salad. Something determined you to still make that choice to get the salad, and that
And
superseded
what's the evidence that the brain
the other.
determined me to pick the salad? And
What?
where's the evidence that my brain is what determined me to pick the salad?
What else determines your thoughts? The brain.
And why
It's
is
the
it that
brain.
for some people they would have picked the pizza and that I picked the salad? I mean, why did
Because
their
their
brain
brain
determine them
wasn't
differently?
because their brain wasn't stimulated as mine was. They had different environmental circumstances that led them to eat the pizza.
So yeah, I don't think I'm going to convince you, but I don't think I also remain unconvinced because I do think that's almost saying that we're all just Jeffrey Dahmers that didn't live Jeffrey Dahmer's life. That's almost what I'm getting here. I mean,
No, we all have different and separate experiences, but they're all differently
yeah, but you're
determined.
saying our experiences wholly determine us and nothing else.
Yeah, what's wrong with saying that?
Because I mean, I know you're going to go back to the arguments you've stated, but that means there's zero accountability for action. There's just
No, we can still hold each other accountable. It's just a superficial sense of holding people accountable. It's not in some kind of intrinsic or objective sense, but it's still subjective.
yeah, we're holding people accountable because their experiences that they had no control over led them to do a crime that they had no control over doing.
Okay, and what is wrong with that? When we live in a world
Well,
where
this
we
is
don't
what's
want
wrong with that. This is precisely what's wrong with that.
no,
Is
no,
that
because look, even if we had free will, you'd still want to punish those people. So I'm sorry, nothing changes between a free will deterministic world in terms of punishment. We still want to punish people for what they do wrong. Hence, this way it doesn't happen again. We still want to punish people just like we do in a free will world.
yeah, but under my worldview, when we punish people, we actually believe that okay, this is going to lower the amount of people doing these things.
We
And under
still believe
yours,
that. We still believe that.
how if their experiences wholly determine the actions they do? We have no control over that.
Because that punishment can determine or deter others from doing that same action again. That's the point.
No.
There's a long line of deterministic things, and
What
we are just in it deterministically, also affecting other things
what
deterministically. It's
what
all
does the punish?
it's all a loop.
But what does the punishment system do to deter the experiences that made Jeffrey Dahmer's life Jeffrey Dahmer?
Well, when people see others punished for doing actions, they go, "Wait a minute, should I do this? Probably not." And
That's free will.
that's
That is
not
free
free
will
will,
right
sir.
there.
That's their brains.
Of course it
That's
is.
their brains being
That's
determined
their brains.
by those.
Okay, well, what you're calling a brain, maybe I'm calling free will.
No, it's the brain that is, by definition, being stimulated by the actions it sees, the outside world. So again, that just further proves my point that it's determined. Because every time somebody sees something happen in the outside world, it deters them from doing that action. It determines them from doing certain things. That's the point. And you're going to say, well, the brain is free will. What do you mean by that? What is free will? I still don't even think that free will is defined. It makes no sense. It's incoherent. What is free? What has freedom? But I'll give you one more chance to explain.
Well, what free will is to me is the ability to make decisions that is not caused by environmental, it's not caused by external force. It can be influenced by those for sure. It can be
So then
influenced
it's
by
random. So then it's
no,
random.
it's not random. It can be influenced, but
If it's not random, then it's determined.
No. When you make a decision, that decision is. I believe that decision is wholly. When you made this TikTok, call, that decision was wholly yours, and it may have been influenced by experiences that made you see TikTok, and it may have been
There you
influenced.
go. I was
But
influenced. I was influenced.
okay,
It
but no,
wasn't
your
through.
argument is that it's wholly the experience that creates a TikTok call. Mine is that it's your decision influenced by experiences.
That's determinism, sir. That's soft
No, that is not
determinism.
determinism.
Yes, it is. I agree that we're determined and influenced by other outside influences.
Okay. Well, I could move on to another argument why I do believe in some sort of supernatural creator, because I don't think we're gonna find some kind of common ground on the free will argument.
Okay.
Um, you're probably familiar with the law of contingency, things being contingent on one another.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what your explanation is for something being infinitely contingent, almost being impossible when diagnosed by science.
Who said that it has to be infinitely contingent when we can recognize that the universe itself could be necessary? The universe could have been no other way than it is now.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
that contradict the law of cause and effect that we've observed in everything that is material? That seems almost fantasy to me to think that the universe could be. That's almost like assuming the universe is a god, because Christians say that God is a natural, or not natural. God is a necessary existence, the same way that you're saying the universe could be a necessary existence.
Okay, great. There you go. Just as you say God's necessary, I can say the universe is
Sure,
necessary.
but
There you
both
go.
are
Like
equally
me.
unproven. Both are equally, you know, I can't prove that God is necessary, and you can't prove that the
Oh,
universe is
there you
necessary.
go. There you go. So that argument is moot.
Good. So now
Okay.
that that's moved, how can things be contingent up to a point where there's nothing else contingent if you don't believe that things are infinitely contingent?
Again, there are ways to view the universe in which everything's necessary, and that nothing could have been another way. Nothing
Okay.
could have been. Nothing's contingent. Everything is necessary. In other words, everything had to be the way it was for some deterministic reason.
Aren't you doing exactly what the people you're debating against do? I mean, you're assuming that the universe is necessary, and you're criticizing people for assuming something that seems so impossible to
No,
prove.
because you're adding God to the equation without reason. I see an atheistic view is way more simple. It's way more parsimonious versus a theistic view in which you're adding God. You have reality plus God who grounds it. When we can just say no, it's just reality. So you have an extra step you're making for no good reason.
I don't think it's adding God as much as it is there must be some type of uncaused cause to the equation.
Why?
Because believing that the universe is necessary and everything is necessary is anti-science. That is
Okay,
anti-material.
which law of science does it contradict?
There's nothing observable in the universe that came into existence that wasn't caused by something that brought it into an existence. And you're giving the
This is
universe.
the black swan fallacy. Oh, I don't see any. Every swan I see is white, therefore, black swans are impossible. That's nonsense. There could be other possibilities that you're discounting.
Okay, so you're believing in something unproven, unseen, and in my
No,
opinion, imaginary.
I don't believe it. I'm saying it's a possibility, but also
So what do you believe?
there are different ways of viewing causal relations. You can view them as temporal or spatial, or hierarchical. There are ways to view it in which what you think causation through time is actually isn't happening. Everything already is cause, and there is no first mover. Everything already is moved. It's just from our perspective, we see time moving. That's the A theory, but there's also the B theory of time, in which all time exists simultaneously. The past, the future, they all exist now.
But those are all theories.
They're philosophical theories, sir. And by the way, scientific theories are still better than facts. Even scientific theories are explanations for the facts. They contain facts and
I
laws.
think God is just
But
as much a
furthermore,
scientific
this is a
theory as
very
the one that you
plausible
gave.
idea. It's a very plausible idea to have time be for time to be tenseless. This is what Einstein actually showed with relativity.
Well, I do think that just from a logical perspective, there does need to be a start of time. I mean, otherwise,
Nope, there
how
doesn't
could
need to
there
be
be
start.
today if tomorrow didn't get here yet?
This is what I just talked about. From our perspective, time seems to move from yesterday to today, but that is perceptual. It could be the case that there is no passage of time, that all the time
It could be the
exists
case.
in a static sense, in the sense that it is already there. Just like if you have a cube, all the area of the cube exists simultaneously. Do you agree that all coordinates of the cube exist?
Sure.
Right. In that same sense, we can view that like time. And all of time is viewed spatially, and all of time exists as coordinates on this block. And this is literally called a block universe. In that sense, time doesn't pass. The passage of time is an illusion, as Einstein said.
So, I guess what you're asking me to believe is that for me to instead of saying being consistent with what is observable, that all science has observed laws of cause and effect, and attributing that to a black swan fallacy, I have to believe that somehow time is, you know, is this boundless thing. I have to believe that
You don't
this
have to believe
unproven.
anything, sir. All I'm saying is it's a possibility that you're seemingly discounting because you're motivated to believe in God.
No, but you're discounting
Okay.
the theory of an uncaused causer. Just as I
No, I'm
think your
not.
theory
No,
is
I'm
just
not.
as ridiculous.
I'm not. I'm merely presenting an alternative case in which yours is wrong.
But your title says God is imaginary.
Well, okay, that's just to draw
I
people
think
in, but
yours is just as imaginary as God, as what you
I
think God is.
I can still hold this view and still you be wrong about your A theory of time. It doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with God. This has to do with causation.
No, but I said that you can't believe in an uncaused causer, and you said no, I don't believe in that. Yet you believe that all these things about time, which are not proven, which have no scientific backing, as much.
Yes, they do. They do have scientific backing.
I
Do you know
understand
what
that Einstein's
relativity
theory.
is?
I mean, Einstein's theory. You are stretching it to a degree of,
No, I'm
the.
not stretching anything, sir. Do you even know what relativity is?
I understand time is relative. I
Do you even know
understand
what?
that.
Oh, you do. What
Yes,
does it mean? So, what does that mean? What does time being relative? What does that mean?
time is time does not appear the same as it does depending on where you're at. The time is not the same constantly everywhere at once as
Okay,
it is in one place.
great. And do you know what the B theory is of time?
I haven't studied the B theory.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would go study what the B
I don't
theory
think
is.
that would. I don't think that would disprove the possibility of uncaused cause
Yeah.
if I did study
We're
the B
not
theory.
here to disprove anything.
Well, your title is God is imaginary.
That doesn't mean I
intrinsically.
can disprove. It means that it's likely not the case that God exists. The reason why is because you have to add so many extra things onto your view. Like, for example, even if there is an uncaused cause, that doesn't mean God. That's not evidence of God, because there can still be a natural uncaused
No,
cause.
I agree. I agree that an uncaused
Great.
cause is not
So
God.
then this entire conversation about time is needless. You're just,
No, but I think
things that don't need to be poked.
I think that when you do look into an uncaused cause, which I think aligns with the consistency of everything we've studied, and is a lot closer.
There is no consensus about the uncaused cause, or no, there is no consensus.
Of course, because it is hard to believe. But
No, it's not hard to believe. It's actually, it's there is no consensus about this, and it's arrogant to think that that there's an uncaused cause because science, when you can even show the science that shows that.
No, I don't think anybody knows anything about how the universe started. We don't know.
Then stop claiming you do.
I'm not claiming I do, but
Okay, great. So then what's
you're
your
claiming.
evidence for God?
Okay, I think an uncaused cause is a possibility.
Okay, how does that mean God exists?
Okay, if there is an uncaused cause, there must be characteristics that this uncaused cause has to have, and we can derive these characteristics, just using debating or logic.
You mean deduce. Okay, how do you deduce these qualities? Go ahead.
Okay, first off, whatever this uncaused cause was has to be intelligent. I don't, and the reason I think this thing has to be intelligent is because I can't assume
Go ahead.
that something intelligent or non-random, which I know is you're going to say is subjective, me assuming that human beings are non-random. But I do think that there is a way we can gauge that it isn't random.
Okay, so you're saying intelligence is needed because if there's no intelligence, it would be random.
Um, I'm almost going the other way. I'm saying because that I observe that the things around me cannot be random because they make too much sense to be random. It must come from something that is not
Yeah,
random.
this is very very confused. First of all, the universe we live in could be. There's no reason why it couldn't be the result of chance and probability, in the sense that we are one of countless other universes. That could be the case. In that sense, there would be a random cause, a random universe generator in which it randomly generates different universes, and we happen to be in one. That's a very possibility to me. And by saying that, oh, that can't be the case, I think that's ridiculous.
I'm not saying it can't be the case, but I'm saying it's far
Okay,
more
great.
logical that
So
isn't the
then
case.
it's not logical.
No.
Where's the inconsistency in that view?
Well, it's the same way that it's like if I had 10 coins that sit from 1 to 10 in my pocket, and I threw them out of my pocket, and they all happen to line up 1 to 10, and I said, well, that must be random. You would probably say that was a magic trick more than it being random because of how hard it is to believe. Well, the same way I'm looking at the processes that make up the earth, that make up the universe, and I'm saying that it's far too orderly and organized and make too much sense for it to come from a random process. I'm doing the same thing that you would probably do, that you do every day, but you're
No,
just not doing it in this
no,
case.
we don't. That's disanalogous. And the reason why is because when, in the case of the quarters that you pull out of your pocket, we know all the possibilities that are the result of throwing the quarters. We know that there's a 50-50 chance of it being heads or tails. We know this, and we can, when we produce probability statements about something, when we assess the probability, we factor in all the possibilities, the end results. That's how we generate possibilities, and that's great. You can do that with coins, but when it comes to the universe, we don't have multiple possible end results. We don't know the possibilities.
Well, we do.
It could
We
be
do
the
know
case.
that if a proton was slightly bigger, we wouldn't exist.
Hold on. It could be the case that this is the only universe there could be. In that sense, it's a 1 out of 1 chance. We are here 100 with 100% certainty we're here. It also could be the case that there's a billion trillion other universes, and in that case, we just be 1 out of a billion trillion. And of course, if there's an infinite number of universes, it's inevitable again that we'd be here. So, you have to do the work into demonstrating how probable the universe is, and you can't do that. Nobody can do that.
Well, we have done that to an extent. We know that if we know certain things like distances, the speed of light, we know that the size of protons, we know that if these things were changed to an infinitesimally small degree, universe wouldn't exist, or it would be drastically different. It wouldn't produce life.
We also know that if the universe was different, it would be more suitable for life. If in other words, if there was more dark energy or less dark energy, there would be more life in the universe. So yeah, sure, you can change.
Yeah, but there's ways.
There's ways to make it better than it is. So
no, there's way less ways to make it better than it is more.
How do you know that? How do you know that? We don't know that.
Well, we do because we know that changing these things we know that we fit into a very small box from all of
Well,
these.
we don't know how small the box is because, well, first of all, there's a units issue here. If you're going to use units like, for example, light years, well, if I measure my height in light years, my height is like 10 to the negative 16 light years. However, if I alter my height in light years by even, 0.00016%, that would be what? 0.01 light years. That would be a huge difference in my height. I'd be twice as tall, even if I changed a little bit in light years. But that's what you're doing with the proton. That's what you're doing with all the other units that you're using. Oh, well, if we change these units to gravity by a little bit, we'd all be different. Well, yeah, that's because your units are arbitrary, just like the case in my light year example. Therefore, if I then again measure my height in miles or in meters, well, now it can vary a lot, and I'd still be, similar height. So, in other words, you are arbitrarily controlling how wide or small the margins can
Uh,
be
uh,
between life and death when you're
whether
using these arbitrary units.
whether you make those units bigger or smaller, the case is still going to be that life existing is a much smaller chance than it not existing.
No, because that statement that there'd be a small chance of us existing if it was a tiny bit off, that hinges upon the units being objective when they're not.
Okay, I mean, I do think that if you increase the units, I think if you increase the units, the same is going to be proportionately true regardless. But I mean, even then, I still I'm still, I guess, not. You could say this is almost a personal argument more than a one backed by research, but it's just the observation of things being so organized and orderly. I mean, the human makeup. I mean, two eyes being allowing us to see depth and experience depth, which will allow us to
You don't
converse
want to go here.
x-axis.
You don't want to go here, sir, because there's a plethora of terrible examples of our physiology. Like in giraffes, the left recurrent laryngeal nerve, it took a 15-foot detour. That's preposterous. No intelligent designer would ever design such a ridiculous thing. How about the fact that we have one hole to eat and breathe from? That's a terrible design. That's why people choke to death every year. That's dumb. How about the autoimmune system that kills itself over time? That's terrible. There are a lot
I mean,
of
you haven't seen the
more ways to
alternative, so you're
fix.
kind of assuming that that's terrible.
There are a lot more ways to fix our bodies than to make it worse.
That's just as much an assumption that I'm making, actually.
Well, the difference is that in this scenario, it's a way more calculable assessment because we know that a simple pair of glasses can fix your eyesight. A simple hearing aid can fix your ear, your sound. The point is that there's a lot more things we can do with the body because the body is a relatively small thing. There's not much you can change, but from the things that you can change, we can make it way better. Which signifies to me that if there's an intelligent being, it would not make it like we are. Especially when you consider all the examples in nature of terrible, terrible things that are the direct result of evolutionary processes, like cancer.
I mean, I don't think that those things don't necessarily they don't disprove the possibility of a creator. Especially since a lot of the writings that go for a creator, they acknowledge that these things exist.
There is no such thing as disproving empirically.
Okay.
Proving or disproving is a logical issue, not an empirical issue. So I'm not saying I can disprove God by saying evolution. I'm simply countering your position of, oh yeah, look at our bodies, they're great. Well, I can counter that very easily with counterexamples, and that's all I'm doing here.
Well, would
Render
you
it
say
more
then?
unlikely. That all this argumentation does is render it more unlikely that God exists, not that it's disproven.
So would you instead change your title then to being God is more it is more unlikely for God to be is more likely for God to be
That's the
imaginary?
same thing as saying God's imaginary. It's the same thing. It's just a tautology.
Well, you just criticized me for saying using disproving and proving, and you were making a fact statement in your title saying God is
I never
imaginary.
said I can prove that God's imaginary. Did I? Right? I'm saying
You're
I
saying,
think
can you
God's
prove
imaginary.
me wrong? We can't prove as much as you can
Wrong.
disprove.
Prove me wrong is simply done by giving evidence, because that statement is not connected to this one.
Yeah, but you made a fact statement, and you've given as much little evidence as I have to disprove my position.
You keep using disprove. I'm not here to disprove God. I'm here to show you why your arguments for God don't work and are backfiring on you.
Well,
I'm sorry,
I
sir,
don't
but
think you have disproved free will. I don't think you have disproved the uncaused cause theory.
you gotta stop saying disprove, sir. I'm not here to disprove anything.
I don't. Okay, I don't think you've made it unlikely. You've convinced me that it's unlikely that there's no free will, that there's no uncaused
Well,
cause.
that doesn't. Well, that's okay, sir. I'm not here to convince you, but I'm here to show people in yourself that there are countering positions that just because you don't find convincing doesn't mean that you're right. You got to do the work and
I
learn.
mean,
The
the same
and the
applies to you, doesn't
preponderance
it?
of evidence shows that you are likely wrong because we know
Right,
how
from
physiology
wrong
works.
with
We know how
your
evolution
evidence.
works. We know how time works, and you don't.
The those the time argument didn't do anything to disprove an uncaused cause, which was my original position, saying that that's a likely
All right,
possibility.
all right, all right. You got to stop saying disprove. I can't disprove an uncaused cause. What I'm saying
Okay,
is,
when I say disprove, I'm saying likely evidence. That's what I mean.
okay. What I'm saying is, you are positing this sense of this being that is uncaused, but is the cause of the universe. I'm simply saying that there are other scenarios that you are simply discounting and saying, no, those are unlikely. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give you counter. I'm always trying to give you counter examples, and you're never able to actually overcome my examples. I'm able to easily overcome your example.
You have
by
not
giving
once
you
overcome
counters.
mine.
Yes, I have. In every single case, I have, sir. You
But-
said there's an uncaused cause. Well, I can point out the universe is infinite in time, and there is no cause. You
That's
just
not-
don't accept them. Just because you're not accepting them doesn't make you correct.
No, I didn't say there is an uncaused cause. I said that's a possibility. The same way that you were giving me
So then
possibilities.
you agree that it's equally as plausible that there's an infinite time.
Anything's possible.
Okay, great. So then you don't have evidence for God, and I have successfully countered you.
I don't think you have countered me because you haven't. The same way your title says, "Can you prove me wrong?" I don't think you've proven me wrong either.
All you have to do to prove me wrong is to give evidence. You have
You
not
haven't given me
a single
evidence.
piece
You
of
haven't
evidence
given
for
me
God.
evidence for there being no free will. You've given zero evidence for there being no free will.
Look, the reason why you are not providing evidence is because I can come back to you with a counterexample that is just as likely. And that's why
Just as.
you don't have evidence. There's no symmetry breaker between both of our hypotheses. And that's not counting the times in which yours is more unlikely. But that's how evidence works, right? Whatever has more data and evidence behind it, more supporting it, that's the one that we go by. Every one of your hypotheses are not good evidence of God.
I don't think any of your hypotheses are good evidence for there not being one.
Okay, so that's why we argue, and that's why every time I've shot you down every single time and countered it
So
successfully.
you shot me down by saying that we don't have free will because our brain makes a decision, and that if you were in Jeffrey Dahmer's body, you'd be Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, that's not shooting me down. That's illogical because that means that
Where's the inconsistency then?
it's not inconsistency so much as it is just illogical. I mean, that you're
That's what
attributing.
illogical means. You don't know what you're talking about. See, you are.
I mean, you ought to turn
Dunning-Kruger.
yourself in then.
No,
Go to your prison and turn yourself in if you could be tomorrow's Jeffrey Dahmer.
You are suffering from Dunning-Kruger. You don't know much about logic or science, and you think you know more than me, and you think you know more than everybody else, and you have evidence of that. You don't. I'm sorry.
No, I don't. I think you're as guilty as that as I am.
No, because you're laughing at the notion that if I was Jeffrey Dahmer, I would be Jeffrey Dahmer. That's trivial. That's trivial, sir. And you're laughing at it because you think it's wrong. That's easy to laugh, but you didn't counter it. And you're saying it's illogical, but how? Where's the logical inconsistency? And your failure to show why it's illogical doesn't mean you're winning. And you're with your laughter. Laughter doesn't signify you're winning. I'm sorry. So laugh all you want, but you haven't given a counter. You don't know what you're talking about. I'll give you one last chance.
I'm only laughing because you're saying I didn't say if you were Jeffrey Dahmer would you be Jeffrey Dahmer. I said if you were born in his circumstances would you be Jeffrey Dahmer, and you said yes. That's a little bit funny.
Yes,
And sorry, that is a little bit
if I
funny.
was in his shoes, I would be Jeffrey Dahmer.
Okay, if I were in Jeffrey Dahmer's shoes, I can safely say I would not go to murder people. So I guess that's where the difference lies between
You
us.
can
All right.
think
So
that,
I don't
sir,
think we're
but I'm
convincing
sorry.
each other.
You would be Jeffrey Dahmer if you were
That's
Jeffrey
you're
Dahmer.
assuming that. That's just an assumption that you're making. It's just as much as I am.
I'm sorry, sir, but it's logically the case. It's definitionally the case. If I was Jeffrey Dahmer, I would be Jeffrey Dahmer.
That's only a materialistic worldview where your
No.
decisions are wholly defined by your experiences.
So you're saying that if you were Jeffrey Dahmer, you be you?
I'm saying if I were born in Jeffrey Dahmer's circumstances, I don't think I would murder because I could not find in myself to murder.
Yeah, so there you go. That's what you're being illogical now. You're saying if you were Jeffrey Dahmer, I would be me. That's not
because I do think there's a me that is separate from. We're going. This is materialistic
identity
worldview versus free will. Yes,
that defies the law of
that
identity.
is precisely what the argument's about. No, because you're attributing identity to experience solely. I'm saying that there's an identity beyond the experience.
And you have no evidence to support that. And all you're doing is laughing at my view and not giving any evidence to support yours. That's not how you argue.
Well, I do think that you ought to be consistent and live your worldview out then.
I am consistent.
No, you're not, because you live my worldview.
I don't live your worldview.
You definitely do. You made this TikTok.
I act as if it's true, but I still think that you're wrong, and I have good reason to think you're wrong.
Well, think about this. If there is no free will, you're not really right because you're just determined to say the things you're saying, and I'm not really right or wrong because I'm just determined to say I don't really believe these things. I'm just doing them.
Give the argument showing that I can't have truth if I'm determined to have it.
No, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have truth to have it, but what I'm saying is that...
Okay, then you're wrong. Then I can have truth, and I can know facts even if I'm determined to know facts.
You determined to know facts. So you just happen to be the one out of all of us determined to have the right answer.
Anybody can be determined to have the right answer, sir. I'm not the only one. But the point is that there is a deterministic way in which we derive what's true and what's not true. It's all deterministic.
And if you convince somebody, they're determined to get convinced. So you're not even really the one convincing them.
Exactly. Congratulations. Yeah. Welcome to determinism.
Yeah, I'm very happy that I don't actually accept that worldview because thanks to that.
That doesn't matter if you're happy. And it doesn't matter if you're happy. And this is often what happens with Christians like that. They feel comfortable in their views. They feel comfortable with there being a God. They feel comfortable with there being a Jesus who died on a stick. I'm sorry, but comfort doesn't lead to truth. All the time. It's not reliable. It's not a reliable way of knowing what's true. You can be happy with your belief. It doesn't make you right. Hello? Hi.
So I want to ask you a question basically about you saying God is imaginary. Is this you? Are you saying that God does not exist?
Yeah.
So why do you believe that God does not exist?
There's no evidence.
All right. So that's pretty easy to give. Okay. So what I would say here is I would say by definition I believe that God would exist just by being God alone. So I describe God as a maximally great being that no greater being can be thought of. That is what I would describe God to be. All right.
Wait, hold on. Are you Christian by chance?
Am I Christian?
Yeah.
No. I hold to a Christian like worldview, but It's not Christianity, no.
You hold to a Christian worldview, but you're not
No, no, no,
Christian.
no, no. No, it's a Christian-like worldview. So basically, I do believe that God is all good, all powerful. I believe in the omni properties themselves. I believe in those properties. That is probably the highest I would go. I don't believe anything else from the books.
Okay, but you believe God is all good.
I don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, what I would say here is that yeah, if God's described as a massively great being, then we can basically prove God through basically just using logic, right? So what
What do
we
you
would
mean
say
by
is,
maximally? Hold on. What do you mean by maximally great?
we could say you could say ultimate perfection, a being that no greater being can be thought of. You can say anything after that. Is that what you're asking?
That cannot be thought of. So,
A being that no greater being can be
so
thought of.
my version of greatness is large breasts. Does God have large breasts?
What?
Does God have maximally large breasts?
Is that what you would consider to be a positive? I don't get what you're asking.
That's maximal greatness to me.
What?
That's what I think maximal greatness is. That's my maximally great being.
Mike.
Big
Do you know
breasts.
Mike? Explain to me how breast is something that's maximally great.
Well, that's just my belief.
Explain to me how it's
That's what I
maximally
think
great.
greatness means. That's what I think
So
maximal greatness.
so what about it? What about it entails some type of perfection, Mike?
They're perfect, voluptuous breasts. They're perfect.
So what is that?
They're perfect breasts, sir. Now, what is your contention here? Why do
It's
you get
because
to say?
Mike.
Look. Why do you get to say that my God is maximally great, and nobody questions that? But all of a sudden, I say I believe in a maximally great breast, and now you're questioning that. What do you mean by maximal greatness? This is why you have to be elaborate. Why do we have to accept your version of greatness? Why must we accept your version of what's great?
Hold on. I'm trying to explain to you, right? So when I'm saying maximally great, I'm saying anything within the realms of perfection.
That's
That
subjective.
is what I'm saying.
What you deem perfect
So
is arbitrary.
all right. So I got a question, right, for you, Mike. I got a question. Do you think that being all knowing is in the realms of perfection?
Well, first of all, I don't agree that you can know everything, and there's a conundrum with omniscience.
Possible?
How do you know everything?
Is it possible, Mike?
I don't think it's possible.
Mike, is
to-
it
to know-
possible?
Sir? Is it
No,
possible?
okay.
How is it possible
continue.
to know everything if you don't know you know everything?
Okay, this is the reason, Mike. Okay, I can explain to you, right, Mike?
know that you know everything, and couldn't it be wrong about something? Couldn't there be something beyond your knowledge that God doesn't know about?
So pause, right? Again, right, Mike? Now, what I'm going to explain to you, right? Basically, the reason why we know that it's not impossible is because for something to be impossible means that it entails some type of contradiction. If it does not defy the laws of logic, then it is therefore possible, Mike. So we know something being all knowing is
But there's
possible.
a problem. There's a paradox, however. Does knowing all facts include knowing that you know all facts?
Does knowing all facts what? Say that again.
If you're omniscient, does it mean that you know you're omniscient?
Let's say yes.
Okay, so God knows he's omniscient. So that means God knows everything. But could God be wrong about something? Is it possible?
Could God be
Is
wrong?
it possible that God could be wrong about something?
No.
Or is it possible that there could be something beyond God's knowledge?
No.
So now you're saying it's impossible that there's something beyond God's knowledge. Where's the contradiction in something
Well,
beyond God's knowledge?
Because again, right? If God is described as if God is described as a maximally great being, then something that is basically greater than God, we would call that such thing God. So there's no such thing.
Then all you've done is define your God into existence. Anybody can do this. All you've done is say God is this definition, and there you go.
Well,
That
I
doesn't
can.
do anything for
Mike,
us.
the thing about this, Mike. The thing about this, Mike, is that we can prove it.
You
I can prove. I can prove. Yes, I
that
can
God
prove my
knows everything.
definition. I can prove. Hold on, Mike. I can prove, right, that if God is possible, then He would necessarily exist within our reality. So by you just saying that it's
Okay,
possible,
go ahead.
Mike.
Let's hear the argument.
All right. So as you agree, it's being all knowing is possible. So positive properties are possible. If positive properties are possible, then they're necessarily possible.
I
Now,
don't
the way,
accept that.
hold on. I can prove this claim right here, Mike, right? We can prove this claim by saying that positive properties can only cause other positive properties. Therefore, anything that comes from this positive property would necessarily be positive. So now that gets us to the conclusion that positive properties are necessarily possible.
Possible
now-
properties?
Necessarily possible properties, yes.
Necessarily possible properties.
Yes. Okay. So when something is necessarily possible, it means that it's possible in all possible worlds.
Okay.
So any possible reality you can think of, this will be possible in it.
Is it possible for God to be evil?
Is it possible for God to be evil? No.
So
It-
then
it-
God's not. So then God's not possible in all possible worlds.
How?
Because couldn't there be an evil God?
Could there be an evil God? No.
Why not? Why isn't it possible?
Because again, Mike, what this does, this means this all you're simply saying here, right, Mike, is that the privation will be considered a positive property. We can't say that.
How? Why not? Why?
Because
why
it's
must
a
you
contradiction.
Hold on.
It's a contradiction.
Why must you insist that your God is good and evil is the privation of God when I could just reverse it on you and say that evil is God and goodness is the privation of God? It's
But
so arbitrary. It's so arbitrary
Mike,
what you're doing.
but
Anybody
Mike-
can define God into existence.
But Mike, right, you will have to explain how your evil God is something that is necessarily possible. You can't demonstrate that.
I use the same route you're using. Oh, God is
you
necessarily evil. Okay,
You-
then
you
you can't
can't.
say that God is good. Then you can't say that God
What?
exists.
Oh, okay. Mike, I don't think you're understanding, Mike. Or are you? Right? Because again, what you're saying, right, is the privation of God. Right? If you're saying that the privation itself is God, then all you're doing is just replacing good and evil, right? Right? Is that what you're doing? So what you would so again, when you do this, right, you have to demonstrate how evil is something that is necessarily possible. You have to demonstrate that.
I'll do
As
that
I
once
already
you.
did.
I'll do
I've
that once you show me
demonstrated.
that goodness is necessary.
I've already did, Mike.
And by the way,
I already did.
how can there be a privation of something if God is omnipresent? Isn't God everywhere?
That's not what omnipresent means.
What does so then? What is
So
omnipresent?
it's because, Mike, when you picture omnipresent, right, you have to think of basically, let's say, an author towards a book, right? How an author can see all moments of the book and all timelines of the book. That is how God is when we say omnipresent. God is basically just like some author for a book. That's how we can describe God. It's not what you.
So then there's a world outside of God that contains the book. So there's a world outside of God that contains me, because clearly I'm not grounded by God. I'm a separate existence entirely, and capable of being independent of God. Is that true?
Can you repeat that for me again? My bad.
If you're gonna say that God is merely the author of the universe, and the universe is separate from God in the full sense, we're independent from God. Well, that means that we're in independent existence from God entirely. We're not contingent
I
on
would
God.
disagree. I would disagree.
Okay. So then that means that would follow from your view that God is not omnipresent.
What? No. Okay, my bad, Mike. Can you repeat what you said? The last sentence you said one more time. My bad. I have my headphones in.
Look,
I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding the right thing.
if God isn't present at all in certain in certain areas of the universe, well, then who is responsible for that area of the universe where God isn't at?
Oh, no, 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 no. Okay, now I understand what you're saying, Mike. So basically, the universe isn't something that's independent of God. I wouldn't say it like that. No, 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 no. What I would describe the universe more as it's more like a let's say a piece of God's nature. Let's describe it more like that.
A piece of God's nature.
Yes, it's made to like basically replicate God's nature.
Oh,
It's
so
not
then the
necessarily.
universe is good. So then the universe is good. Fully
Well,
good.
it's possible. I would say it's possible. Yes, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, it must be the case that the universe is good. And if the universe is good, then everything in the universe is good. Right?
Well, no, I wouldn't necessarily say it like that. No,
So how
It-
can
it-
the universe
well,
be
it's
good,
because
but
Mike,
things are going to be bad?
Mike, it's because the way that you're describing it, Mike, you're describing it as if God is forced to make nothing but perfections. This is another. This is illogical. This would be God basically just creating another God. Just because God is something that's all good does not mean that He has to create something else that is like all good. That is not how I see it. No.
Why not? Why would it be the case that God can make something wrong or evil or bad if God is all good?
Well, again, because I've already told you, this will just be a contradiction. This would be a contradiction to God's nature. I've already explained that to you. Because this would be God just creating another God.
So then everything God does must be good. Everything God creates must be good.
No, Mike, no. I've already told you it's a contradiction.
What's a contradiction?
Again, not a contradiction, but this goes against the laws of logic.
Which one?
The law of identity, right?
Okay, and how does it go against the law of identity?
Because I've already told you, this would be God just creating another God that is exactly like Him. That's no point of that.
Well, first of all, why couldn't God do that? Yeah, why couldn't God do that? Why couldn't God create another being like Him, or at least a universe that's not identical to Him, but has all of its properties except for being God?
Because again, that's not how God works, right? What do you mean? What do you mean? You have all the properties of God? What do you mean? You have
I'm
all
sorry,
of
I'm
His
sorry,
properties
sir.
except for
I'm
not-
sorry. But I don't want you to sit here and just say, well, that's not how God works, when I'm clearly raising concerns that you can't answer. I want
No.
logical answers, and you're not giving a single logical answer. You're just making up definitions. You're just making up words.
What?
You're just saying God's maximally great. What does that even mean?
I've already told you a being that no greater being can be thought of. I've already told you that.
Well, what do you mean by great?
Again, in the realms of perfection. That's why I asked you certain questions.
What do you mean by
Okay.
perfection? What do you mean by perfection? If you're going to say
I've
God,
already told
then
you.
no
I've already
shit.
told you.
Anybody
Mike,
can
I've already
define
told you,
perfect.
Mike. Okay, so let's put it like this, right? Okay, let's say all knowing, right? All knowing is something we would say that's in the realms of perfection, right, Mike?
No,
Do you disagree
I
with
don't
that?
know I don't know what you mean by perfection. Your perfection
Okay, so
is your
okay,
own idea of it.
okay, so again, something that is perfect, right, means that anything that is based, let's say anything that is, let's say a privation of it, right, will be called, what we consider, imperfect or, not maximally great. That's what I would describe a perfect being as, something that
Okay,
can have,
how
that
do
can
you
have
know that?
imperfections.
How do you know that it's perfect to know all, but
Because
imperfect to
again,
not know all?
right, if we describe all knowing, right, all knowing literally means perfect knowledge. That's literally what it means.
Okay, but how do you know that having all knowledge is perfect and not having knowledge is not perfect?
Because its negation is a imperfection. That's how it works.
Again, you're assuming your own definition of perfection.
How is? Oh my
There's-
gosh.
The point is that
Okay.
there's nothing objectively perfect. There's nothing that stands independently perfect.
So I got a question for you, Mike. What's the contradiction?
I'm not saying there's a contradiction. I'm saying that your definition is arbitrary. Just as you say God is all knowing and that's perfect, I can say God is Beyonce and that's perfect.
No, you cannot.
Why not? That's just my definition.
Because as I've already told you, right, Mike, you have to give some demonstration, right, of how this is something that is necessarily possible. You can't demonstrate that.
Sure, I say Beyonce is necessarily possible, and that's it.
Oh my gosh,
Beyonce exists in every possible
Mike,
world.
I want to catch you.
We
Listen,
don't need God.
what
We
does
don't need your
necessarily
version of
possible
God.
mean? What does necessarily possible means?
Possible in every world.
Oh, okay then. So are you saying that there's a world that Beyonce does not exist in? There,
She
there, there,
exists in
there-
every world. She exists in every world.
so you have to demonstrate that.
That's just my definition of it. Perfection.
Oh my god. So yeah. This is a typical atheist approach, right? You try to bring up something that you want to consider to be necessarily possible, but do not want to demonstrate it being
But
necessarily
that's what
possible.
you're doing. Demonstrate that
No, no,
God
no.
is possible in every world.
I've
and
already
and
told
then
you.
goodness is possible in every world.
Okay, I can explain to you one more time, right? Again, positive properties is what we would call, let's say, maximally great or perfect, right? Okay, again, if these properties are possible, such as all-knowing, omnipotent, if these things are possible, then they're necessarily possible based on the simple fact that
Show me
they
that
can only
goodness.
create other.
Show me that goodness is necessarily possible in every world.
I'm trying to. You have to let me explain.
Give the
So
argument for
again,
that. Give the argument for that.
okay,
Give the argument for that.
okay, I'm trying to. Positive properties are possible. If positive properties are possible, then they're necessarily possible. They're necessarily possible because of the simple fact that positive properties can only create other positive properties, which means that that is something that is necessarily true.
Positive properties can only create other positive properties. You can do that.
Yes.
You can do that as an evil god.
Oh my gosh. Then you have to explain, you have to give some demonstration as to why this is something that is a positive property. You have to explain that. You have not yet explained it.
Why can't evil be a positive property?
Because it's a negation of a positive property.
Well, so I can do that for goodness. Goodness is a negation of evil, which is a good
Okay,
property.
so
It's
can
all
you
arbitrary. You're not getting the
so I
point.
got a
It's all
question, Mike.
arbitrary.
So Mike, now what I want you to do here, right, is with their evil God. Can you show me how this privation, something that is not all perfect or in the realms of perfection, is perfect? Can you demonstrate that? Because by definition, my being is a perfect being. By definition, yours is
Well, by
not.
my definition, God's perfect. My
Oh
God,
my
my Beyonce's perfect.
You have to explain how. You're not giving any explanation. You're just blurting out stuff.
Because this evil Beyonce exists in all possible worlds.
So you have to demonstrate that. Because I can argue that there's a possible world that Beyonce does
So
not
I have
live
to
in.
demonstrate Beyonce, but you don't have to demonstrate your God. That's nonsense.
I've already told you. Because my God, my God by definition is a being with all positive properties. By
Okay,
definition.
then I can look. I can do the same thing with any other object I want. I can say there's a magical Beyonce, and she is perfect by definition. I can do that for anything I want to. That's the problem with saying maximal greatness. This is a very bad argument on your end. It's arbitrary. Deem as perfect or greatness.
Mike, but again, right? You're not using modal logic when you explain your Beyonce or your evil God being necessarily possible. You're just asserting it. You're just assuming the S5 axiom. You cannot
The
do
same
that.
thing you're doing with your
That's not
God.
what I'm doing. I've already told you, right? By definition, right? My God is a being that is maximally great, right? So this is what it means to hold on.
You just reiterated the same problem. By definition, you said by definition, my God is maximally great. Why can't you say that for Beyonce? Why can't I
Because
do
Mike-
that for Beyonce?
Mike, it's because your Beyonce, Mike, is not a maximally great being by definition. Beyonce
Yes, it
not a
is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Mike, all you're doing, right, is taking God's name and changing it to Beyonce. That's what you're doing.
Prove it.
Okay.
Prove it. Beyonce is not maximally great.
All right, that is simple. Because there's a possible world that Beyonce does not live in. Beyonce is a mortal
By
being.
definition,
Hold on,
she exists in all possible
Mike,
worlds.
Mike, hold on, Mike. Okay, again. Now, I'm going to say this one more time, Mike. All you're doing is taking God's name and changing God's name with Beyonce, and then trying to fit the God definition with
It's
Beyonce's name.
not the same entity as your God. This Beyonce is evil.
Oh my God! So it's just okay. So you
So
stop
it's not
calling
your
it
God.
Beyonce.
It's just a different entity.
So you have to stop calling it Beyonce.
Well, that's my God, and she's evil. She's not good.
Okay, so
your
I'm
God
just-
is not
every time you say
necessary.
Beyonce- So every time you
Your
every
God
time
is
you
not
say
necessary.
okay, let me finish. All right, so now every time you say Beyonce, then I'm gonna just assume that you're talking about an evil God. All right, so again, I'm going to demonstrate to you in the best way possible because this is probably the worst objection that can ever possibly come to somebody. So now, for there to be a possible world where your being does not exist in, then you have to tell me the contradiction with my God existing within your evil God world.
No, I'm not saying there's a contradiction.
Okay, so Mike, if you say if you're saying that there's a possible world that God does not exist in, then you're saying that God is impossible.
No, I'm not saying that God's impossible. I'm saying that there's other definitions of God that are perfectly plausible and render yours not necessary.
Again, okay, if my being is not necessary, then he's impossible.
No, how does it
Yes.
follow? How does it
Yes.
follow?
Because again, it's either that God is necessarily possible or God is impossible. Because if God is possible, then by definition, God is necessarily possible. I've already explained that, Mike.
That
What you're doing here?
assumes your definition of God. That assumes your definition's true.
Oh my gosh.
That's
So I
just
got a
question
question.
begging. That's just question begging.
What? Okay, so Mike, how can you say I'm assuming my definition if you are a person that disagrees with all definitions? How can I
don't disagree
give
with
a
every
before
definition.
you disagree with all definitions?
I'm not disagreeing with definitions. I'm simply saying that yours are arbitrary.
Okay, so again, is my definition possible?
Well, that's debatable, but for the sake of argument, sure, we can say it's possible.
All right then. So now you're agreeing that what I call God to be is something that is possible. So now my God is something that has positive properties, which are all knowing, omnipotent, etc. The omni properties. Okay. So now if you're going to agree that these are possible, Mike, then all you're gonna do is put yourself in another hole here. Because all I'm gonna do is present the same exact argument that if God is possible, then he's necessarily possible. Now, if you're disagreeing with what I'm saying, then you're saying that God is impossible, Mike.
No, I'm simply saying that your definition is arbitrary, and just as you say, my God by definition is necessarily possible, I can say Beyonce is necessarily possible, and we're both in the same place.
Mike, you have to demonstrate that. You can't just assert that. You're asserting
That your
that
God's necessarily possible. You can't do it. You're just
What?
asserting. You're just saying it's by definition true.
Okay. Again, I'm going to say this one more time. I've demonstrated how God is necessarily possible. I don't understand why you're asking me this. Right? If you're agreeing that everything that I gave you is possible properties, Mike, then you're saying that these possible properties.
I'm sorry. I just can't do that anymore. Come back next time. Please elaborate if you come back. I just don't. We're not getting anywhere. There's no progress being made there.
Yo, what's up, Mike?
Hi.
You okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, so I'm gonna run in the argument from motion, but we're not just gonna run the argument from motion. We're gonna show why this unmoved mover cannot be the universe and must be our mind. So yeah, that's just that. Is
Okay.
that okay? Cool. All right. Yeah. So I'm just gonna run you through 9 premises or 8 premises, one conclusion, and then you can either interrupt me halfway or you can, respond at the end. I don't mind. So premise 1: change is real.
I reject that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So go
There
ahead.
you go. That's false. That's nonsense.
Okay. So change isn't real. So can you elaborate?
Yeah, change is not a real thing. There's no intrinsic property of the universe that says things change. Does not have to be the case at all. Change can be perceptual, it can be relative.
Yeah. So change doesn't exist beyond the perception of change.
Yeah, it could be the case that change is merely perceptual and it's not intrinsic to the universe itself.
Is the perception of change different than the lack of perception?
The perception is different from the lack of perception.
Yeah, that would entail a change.
No, it wouldn't. That's
Yes, it
just
would.
it. You're just
Because
saying
that's a
that,
different state of affairs.
well, what I could also say is that the universe is necessarily this way.
No, you can't.
In the sense that there is no. Yes, we can. We can say. Why can't we say the universe is necessarily this way?
Yeah, because the universe is composite, right? And you don't have a principal reason for its composite.
No. What is it composite of?
Dark matter, energy.
No, that's just one view. It also could be the case that the universe is not composite at all, and it's composed. It's just one entity, one unchanging, eternal quantum state that is not composed of other things except for itself.
Yeah, so the universe is composed of different things, though.
It's
Why
not
don't know?
composed of different things. Again, you're assuming that the things we see are parts that are. You're assuming that you can distinguish things from each other. That is not necessarily an intrinsic property of the universe. We can also view the universe as something where there is no, there are no parts to it, where it is one entity, and it's described as it's described mathematically. So again, we can view the universe differently than the way you're viewing it, and that's why what you're saying is not necessarily the case.
So now you're saying composition doesn't exist beyond the perception of composition. So like a part, like dark.
Yeah, we can say that composition as something that's a real phenomenon of the universe is also perceptual and relative.
So outside of the perception of dark matter or dark energy, dark matter being distinct from energy, that distinction, right? Would that distinction not exist? Would those not be separate parts without the perception? If you took away human minds, let's say.
Oh, well, now you're confusing the map for the territory. Now you're assuming that when we describe things in the universe, that there must be something beyond the mind that grounds this logic. There is no such thing as logic beyond the mind.
I'm not talking about logic right now.
Yes,
I'm just saying does reality exist external to the mind?
You're invoking the law of identity by saying, well, there has to be this difference in perception versus non-perception, but no, that's assuming the laws of logic are beyond the mind when they're not.
So in your position, there would be no distinction between anything. Let's say there would be no distinction between a tree and a rock without the perception of those things.
Well, the distinctions would be virtual, not.
So okay, so the distinctions don't exist in reality; they just exist in our mind.
Correct.
Okay, so. Okay, interesting. So you don't affirm any distinction actually exists?
Well, again, if we describe the universe as one quantum wave function, then it is not composed of parts at all. It is one entity.
Is that thing that you're describing, the one entity, is that distinct from nothing?
I don't believe nothing truly exists. I don't think nothing is logically coherent.
Okay, so distinctions don't actually exist other than perception of distinctions. And you deny that the universe is composite, you just think it's the perception of the universe that makes it composite.
Yep, we can view the universe that way, yes.
So
I'm not saying that this is necessarily the case, but I'm saying this is one way to view the universe in which would challenge theism in that way.
Mm-hmm. See, the way I was going was, obviously, you know what the PSR is, right? Principal sufficient reason. I don't see the principal reason for the universe's composition, which is why I would say that it depends on something that's non-composite, right? Which is where I would get to, obviously, end up getting to God. But if you want to reject the universe's composition, so would the universe in any way be distinct from some other thing in any way, let's say?
Well, that's by definition not possible, because the universe, by definition, is everything, the totality of all things. So,
if something, let's say, existed external to the universe, let's just say, would that be distinct in actuality?
Depends on your definition of the universe, right? If you think the universe is the totality of all, then there's nothing beyond it by definition. But if you're going to say that the universe is a local space-time or a local, part, well, then that's the definition I don't subscribe to.
I still I still don't understand this idea that there is no distinction between anything, right? So would you say, like, on your position, like, dark matter is the same as the sun? Like, are they the same?
Not intrinsically.
Wouldn't an
Perceptually, yes.
perceptually, wouldn't an intrinsic difference mean there is a difference, therefore it's parts?
No, I
Different
don't. I
parts.
don't see why. I don't see why.
Let's say you accept the intrinsic difference, right? Let's just say you accept that. That would still be that would still beg the principal reason for that difference.
How?
Yeah, because you know what the principal sufficient reason is, right? Everything has a reason or a cause or a grounding. Ultimately, if you just say that, like,
Wait, everything has a cause.
sorry, a reason or a grounding. My bad. I didn't mean to say cause.
Everything has a reason. Yeah, I reject that. I reject PSR.
Okay, so you don't believe there is a principal reason for this distinction?
No, I don't agree that there's a reason for. Yeah, I don't agree there's a reason for the universe or any thing like that.
So you ultimately have no justification for the composition, then? That's what it would lead to.
The
And you think 'cause you don't need one.
The composition is, again, relative, right? It's just like change is relative, just like all those things I'm mentioning, right? I don't see any inconsistency in my view.
Okay, so you said that the composition is relative, all right, but you agreed that the sun is still distinct from dark matter, even
For
without
sure.
even without the perception. You think there's an intrinsic difference. The intrinsic difference would mean
Well,
composition.
again, because in a quantum state, all states exist simultaneously, and they're viewed as one. They share the same wave function, and this is, again, quantum mechanics. And that's why things are merely perceptually different, but on the quantum level they are the same. They share the same wave function. In other words, they're the same objects.
Okay, so just to clarify that we agree, so you agree the sun is distinct from dark matter in a way, and how are you affirming it is distinct? In what sense, if that makes sense? In what way is it
Perceptual
distinct?
sense. Not just a
Perception.
perceptual. Yeah, we relativistically perceive it certain ways.
So if you took away the perception, would you say there is no real distinction between the sun and dark matter?
There's no intrinsic distinction, yes. And this is true because, again, if you understand quantum mechanics, wave functions share the same wave function. There's no distinction. It's just one entity.
So under your position, are you saying this quantum state has no composition, there's no parts to it at all?
No parts. It's one thing. Eternal and unchanging, too.
Wait, is it material?
It's mathematical. It's Platonic.
Are you a Platonist?
Well, not necessarily, but, it could be the case.
Well, I know, but like,
This would challenge your view, right? All I'm doing is trying to show you why your view would be challenged.
Sure,
by
but like,
some countering view.
I don't think a logical possibility makes something plausible. Like, I think Platonism, I haven't seen a shred of evidence, like, why I would accept it. You know, if I, as a theist, just
Okay,
said...
well, then I have no reason to accept theism, and we're getting nowhere. But the point
well,
is, your job is to provide evidence, and you're not doing it.
Yeah, so sure, right. So if I can, let's just say, I don't want to do this, but let's just say, for argument's sake, some of the theist says me, okay, so it's not deductive, it's now inductive, and my position has, my hypothesis with the data we observe is more probable because you've ultimately offered no data to argue that. And when you say the quantum state,
What
well, no,
data
it can't be the
have you
unmoved mover. The quantum state you're talking about can't be the unmoved mover because the unmoved mover must actualize change external to itself. All right, and that the only thing that can actualize change without moving itself is a mind.
No, that assumes motion is even a real thing intrinsically. It's not. Again, we are very limited in our understanding of the universe. And for you to say that there has to be some kind of motion that is intrinsic to nature, that's nonsense. we now know that motion is relative. In a way, like in the block universe example, we don't have to even take note of something called motion. There is no motion. There is no passage of time. There is none of that stuff. So again, we can take that out of there by just appealing to something quantum mechanical, like a wave function or a quantum state, which doesn't change. There's no motion at all. It's not intuitive. It's mathematical, and that's all.
Is the quantum state made up of parts?
No,
So what does a quantum state consist of?
it's a wave function. It's
Yeah,
not,
what is that? What
not
is it?
consistent of anything. It's a wave function. It's one entity.
It's one entity. Is there any parts within the wave function?
No,
I mean, is that like I mean, I'll take your word for it.
it is the embodiment of all quantum states into one.
Sure, but that distinction between the quantum states is parts.
It's the same thing as saying it's one entity. It doesn't
But
need
this-
to have one. It's just the way of. It's just your way of quantifying it.
So is the quantum state like identical to like the quantum state not existing? Like
I reject that it can't exist. I reject that it couldn't exist. Right? It's necessary. It's eternally necessary. It's unchanging. It can't be different.
Okay. So with this quantum state you refer to, the wave function, how when you say motion is just relative and motion doesn't actually exist, are you saying that without a human mind, the distinction between yesterday and tomorrow, for example, the distinction we affirm between time, between days, does that not actually exist?
True, it does not exist. It's perceptual again, and this is obvious. This is more obvious to us through relativity. But yes, the distinction between present and past and future, that's not a real intrinsic feature of the universe.
Is wait, can I quickly just grab something from my notes because I have a critique of what you're saying, but I just really need to grab the premises. Is that cool? I'll be like 10 seconds. I can't remember it off the top of my head. All right.
Okay.
Wait 1 second.
Hi, poop scoop. Yeah, people don't understand, especially theists. They need to brush up on their science.
Okay. I mean, I can't find them. I'm just going to try my best from the top of my head, I think. Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, I mean, I think it's kind of rude, but
Not
when
rude,
you say,
that's a compliment that you're doing. Look, it takes courage to come up here. So I applaud you for that. But yes, you do need to brush up on your science a bit more. And it's a critique, but it's not an insult.
okay. So, yeah, so when you say there is, like, no distinction of anything, is the experience, what's the word? So is the experience of all things, is that distinct from the experience of less things, for example? Not all things. Would the experience of all things be distinct from the not the lack of experience of all things? Would there be a real distinction then?
A lack of experience. Well, in this sense, experience wouldn't be. First of all, we don't have to subscribe to a dualist perspective here. We can say that that everything is physical, everything is or platonic. We can appeal to some platonic thing and say that everything is that.
Somebody got my argument for me, by the way, because I couldn't find it in my notes. Somebody commented it.
Yeah.
Can I just read it instead? That's my
Yeah,
full
go ahead.
argument. Okay. Right, yeah. Premise one. I had this in my notes. I just couldn't find it anywhere, so I was scrounging. I can't remember it. Okay. Premise one: if B theory of time is true, then there is no mind that has more than one experience. Premise two: if there is no mind that has more than one experience, there is no experience of the succession of experiences. Premise three: there is the experience of the succession of experiences. Conclusion: therefore, B theory is false. Ellie, thank you for commenting that. Thank you, man. I ran this argument on them. They're an atheist.
No. First of all, experiences of things are not required for the B theory to be true. So experiences are just portions of this block model, right? There's portions of the universe in which things are experiencing, but that experience itself is not intrinsic to the block model. That's why that argument doesn't work, because it's not contingent. The block model is not, the B theory is not contingent on experiences being real.
So, do you believe there is the experience of the succession of experiences?
Yes, but they don't have to be there for the B theory to be correct.
Okay, but when we go premise one of B theory of time is true, then there is no mind that has more than one experience. But then you're saying
That's a non sequitur. Even still, it's not even, if the B theory is true, there is no other mind. That's not doesn't even follow as an argument.
okay. So what's going to be the evidence that B theory is true?
Well, relativity supports the B theory, but it's not even a scientific. It's not even appeal to scientific theories. It's really a philosophical theory of time, and there's the fact that there's no contradiction in it. This makes it perfectly possible.
Okay. So would something being possible, would that make it plausible?
Of course not necessarily. But again, if you don't have a counter scenario in which it renders mind less likely, then you don't have evidence of God.
But like, if I did, for example, like give like a non-contradictory explanation of a God, all right, you would still demand evidence for that God existing. You wouldn't just accept a logical possibility.
Of course, but I'm not here to give you evidence that my atheism is true. I'm here to get evidence of your view and critique your view. And if you have more evidence in your favor than mine, then great. But you haven't done that.
Like, I could show how your position's absurd through like an argument, Aaron. Just real quick, how do you?
Could, even if you could, which you can't, even if you could, it still wouldn't make God correct or theism correct. Go ahead.
Yeah, how do you justify your own agency without appealing to your own agency?
How do I justify I'm an agency?
Yeah, how do you justify your own agency without using your agency?
What do you mean by agency?
A mind that has free will.
I don't subscribe to free will. I don't believe in that. But
Well, how do you justify your existence without appealing to your existence?
how do I justify my existence? I don't think existence needs a justifier. But if you're talking about how do we justify the fact that we exist, well, that's descriptive. In that sense, I think truth is just what corresponds to reality. And when we say I exist, that is justified by the description of what we experience. And that experience to me is physical. I think that the mind is physical too. Everything is physical.
Sure, but everybody commits circular reason on the paradynamic level. I'm not disagreeing with you. I would have to also appeal to my own agency to justify my own agency, right? Or appeal to my existence to justify my existence. The difference is I have priors. I have a justification for why I commit circular reasoning. What's your justification for committing circular reasoning?
Well, there's no other option. There's no other option. In order for me to say I exist, it requires existence.
I agree.
There's no other option. So I don't see how this is.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, but ultimately you can't justify committing the circular reasoning. I'm not disagreeing with you. We commit circular reasoning. What's the justification to commit circular reasoning? To commit circular reasoning requires a justification.
The reason why we commit circularity is because we have no other option, logically speaking.
I disagree.
see why that's a problem.
You can assume priors to
We
justify
can assume priors.
to justify committing the circular reasoning. Yeah. It would
We
be
could, but why would we do that? It's not needed.
Well,
It's
just show
we
that.
don't need to assume God. We don't need to assume God at all.
Well, it would just show that I have a justification for committing circular reasoning and you don't.
Well, why don't I have a justification? I can just simply say I do, and it's the fact that I describe things. There you go. It's the
That's
fact
not a
that
ju-
we have
that's-
the
that's
fact
not a
that we have
justification.
logic. It's the fact that we have thinking brains that can do logic. That's it. Those are my priors. I don't need God.
That's not a justification.
Why not?
Yeah, so ultimately you have no priors to justify this circular reason. You haven't given the
Yes,
justification
I
for
did.
committing circular reason.
I showed you. I explained to you. My priors are the fact that we have brains and we use logic with our brains, and there you go. I don't need anything more than that.
Yeah, so ultimately you still haven't given a justification for the circular reasoning.
The justification it's
To commit the
because I have
circuit-
no
you-
other option. I have no other option available to me, logically speaking.
That's a universal truth claim. How do you have access to universals?
I reject universals. I don't think universals are real things.
So is that claim you just made that you don't have access to anything else? Is that universally true?
No.
So you only have access to particulars.
I never said I have access to universals.
So
I don't think
ultimately,
you do either. I don't think universals are real. But anyway,
is the claim that universals aren't real, is that universally true?
you mean absolutely true? No,
Yeah,
nothing's
it's
absolutely true.
Nothing's absolutely true.
I can say it's analytically true, but anybody can say that. I don't believe that we have access to absolutes.
Is the statement that it's absolutely that no absolute truths exist? Is that statement true?
It's true, but not necessarily absolutely true.
So then ultimately, that's just like self-refuting, like it's self-defeat.
No, I still have access to truth. I still have access to logic and truth. I don't need God. What's the problem?
Yeah. So not only like was there no justification for committing the circular reasoning, but now you're saying you have no access to universal truth claims because you don't think they do. But that in of itself, if that claim that you don't have access to them isn't universally true, well then ultimately it's just like a. Well then you have that's just like self-defeating.
How is it self-defeating, sir? All I'm saying is I justify using logic, although my axiomatically I'm circular. It doesn't matter because I have no other option. And
I'm okay with circular
I
reasoning.
can still come to truth. I can still come to logical truths. I can still come to synthetic truths about reality without God or theism. I don't need God. There's no other there's no necessary God that I need to perform logic or to know things.
Well, there is if you want to say, like, I know you don't hold to this, but if you're going to say logic as like a math, for example, as like an ontology, right? Like it exists. Obviously, I don't think you hold to that. I think if you did, then
Everything
That would
has an
come some
ontology.
problems.
The question is, what is the ontology? Is it distinct from the mind? It's not. To me, I think that mathematics, logic, they're all products of the mind. They're all phenomenon in the mind, whether it's physical or not, but they're mind dependent.
okay. So you agree with me, like concepts like morality and logic and that are mind dependent. Would you agree that these concepts are transcendental?
Morality? No, not at all. Nothing's transcendental, except for perhaps the laws of nature.
The laws of nature are the laws of nature mind dependent?
The laws of nature, I would think, are descriptive. Now, they're totally descriptive. They don't exist outside of the mind as well. Nothing exists outside the mind except for the external world. But yeah, I would say that all those things come from the mind.
Is the claim that the external world exists outside of the mind, is that claim true?
Yes.
Is it universally true?
It says maximally true as I can be, based on my experience, based on lots of evidence we have.
Yeah. I'm asking, is it a universal truth claim then?
I don't have access to universals, sir. I don't think universals are true. Or real things.
Under your position, then, would it be possible for the universe to exist and not exist at the same time?
No,
Why not?
because it's analytically false. It can't be true. It's contradictory.
Yeah, but contradiction surely wouldn't exist under your view. If logic is just like something that like humans
No, of course
decide,
they
then
exist in
what
every
is a
view.
what is a
Look,
contradiction then under your view?
it's just an analysis of two contradictory statements that analytically cannot be true. That's all it means. It's just because logic is mind dependent doesn't mean that contradictions can exist. Because again, you're appealing to the same mind dependent phenomenon that we call logic in making that statement in the first place. So again, it also depends on logic.
But if logic's just mind dependence, right? If it's nothing other than that, right, than what we decide, then when you like say a p and a not p, like the universe can exist and not exist at the same time, like under your position, surely that would be possible because logic isn't like there's no grounding for it. It's just something we
No,
simply decide.
When we even invoke the word contradiction, all you're doing is talking about statements, descriptive statements about the world. And again, those are all mind dependent. They don't exist outside the mind. The external world is, whatever the external world is, we call it the external world. We don't know the true ontology of the external world. Well, we know that there seems to be something out there, but that's a difficult question to answer, right? What is the external world? We don't have an answer. It just seems there's stuff that we call things: trees, earth, planets, stars, universe. They're just descriptors
So
for what we call reality. But whatever reality is, the ontology of reality is something we still don't understand.
so you would say no truth exists without the perception of truth.
Truth is mind dependent.
Okay. So would the claim that when you make the truth claim that the universe, that truth is mind dependent, right? So that without minds there would be no truth. Is that statement true?
Yes. In my view, yes.
But how would that be true if there's no minds? How could a truth still exist?
It wouldn't. There would be no truth without minds.
So it wouldn't be true. So the claim that truth is dependent on a mind, that wouldn't be true if there was no minds?
There would be no truth, period, if there would be no falsehoods or truthhoods if there weren't minds to describe those things.
Well,
They're
but the
all
descriptor of the thing is different than the ontology of the thing.
I disagree. I think that the description of reality is the same thing as our thoughts, descriptions.
So
The mind.
okay, so would the statement that no human minds, there's no human minds, with the statement there's no human minds, would that be true if there was no human minds? Would it still be true that there's no human minds if there was no human minds?
Your question, like this commenter said, you're question begging for epistemic relativism. You're assuming that there has to be some knowledge outside of what we could epistemically access as truth grounding. There is no such thing, in my view. I think that every time we appeal to truth, we're appealing to what we describe, what corresponds to what we experience, what we describe.
So ultimately, the statement that there is no human minds, that in order for truth to exist, it needs human minds. If there was no human minds, that statement wouldn't be true anymore. There'd be no truth to that at all.
Truth is dependent on the mind. Period. In my view.
Truth is dependent on the mind. Would the
Without
claim
minds, without minds, there's no truth, and that's not relevant to the universe existing.
would the claim that without minds there would be no truth, would that be true if there was no minds? Would that claim in of itself be true?
If there are no minds, there is no truth. Period.
Is that claim that if there were no minds there's no truth, would that be true though? Would the claim itself even be true?
There is nobody to make the claim. If there's nobody to make the claim, then there is no truth value.
I know, but you're making the claim currently, but ultimately, if that claim wouldn't be true without Mike's like a claim, ultimately, then it would just be like self-defeating.
How would it be self-defeating?
Because you're saying that truth only exists in the human mind. All right, that is a truth claim, okay, that you're making. All right, but if that isn't true without
Okay.
human minds, then it's not really true. It's just like a, I don't know, just an opinion. Like it just sounds no different to me
How
saying,
is this self-defeating? You have yet to show how it's self-defeating.
yeah, because
Just don't,
ultimately,
look. Your only criticism of this is, oh, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm
No, that's not
sorry,
my-
but
that's not my
that's not how this
criticism.
works. There is no contradiction in my view. There's no inconsistency. It's truth is mind dependent, and without minds, there's nobody to perceive truths. There you go. And there's nothing more to it.
okay, but if that claim that you've just made isn't true, right? Like external to the human mind, right? Other than what you've just said, then ultimately you have no justification for it. It's just circular.
Justification for what? The truth?
Yeah, the truth claim. It's
The truth would just be what describes reality, what logically describes it, what synthetically describes it. That's it.
okay. So the claim that without human minds, truth wouldn't exist. That is only true because of human minds, and without human minds, that wouldn't be true.
No, it's not only true because of human minds.
I mean, how is it true in another way? Because you said truth is dependent on human minds.
It's not. It's not necessarily the case that is true. Well, actually, it could be necessarily the case if you're necessitarian.
I'm not disagreeing with you. The claim wouldn't exist, by the way. I agree with you if there was no minds, the claim wouldn't exist. But the claim is different than something being true.
Yeah, there wouldn't be a true statement. There wouldn't be a claim about it. Therefore,
but
it wouldn't make sense to even invoke that claim.
But the negation of a claim of a truth is different than something being true.
Correct, but the negation is still mind dependent.
Okay, so I can grant you the claim of something being true is mind dependence. I don't disagree with you. There's no disagreement that the claim is mind dependence.
What is the contention with my view?
The contention is that I'm asking you, okay, like regardless if the claim existed of the truth, okay, I don't care about the claim. I'm asking you, if there was no human minds, okay, would it be true that there's no human minds? Without the claim.
That truth statement wouldn't be made if there's no minds. The only
Yes,
reason why you're making that is because there's a mind to make it.
Yeah,
if there's no minds, there's nobody making claims.
Yeah, the statement wouldn't be true, okay?
No,
But would
there wouldn't be an assessment of it being true or not. There wouldn't be
Okay,
an
but-
assessment even.
but
There would be no
the-
claim of it. They wouldn't exist.
The assessment is different than the actual thing being true. Something being actually true is different than the assessment of the claim of truth.
No, I disagree. Something being actually true is the result of the assessment, and
So without the claim, nothing is
mind-dependent.
true. Without the claim of truth, nothing is true under your position.
without statements, which could be claims or not. But the point is not necessarily claims, but without statements, there are no truths. Truths are statements.
Without statements, there are no truths.
Yes.
Would it
statements.
okay? So would it be true that without statements there are no truths if there was no minds?
If
I'm
there
not
are
talking
no
about the claim.
minds,
I'm
there are
not
no
talking about the
truths. There are
claim.
no statements without minds. Therefore, there are no truths.
Okay, there are no truths. Okay, so there are no truths without human minds. Great, we got it. Okay, there are no truths without the human minds. Okay,
Not human minds, but any mind.
Okay,
that
okay,
can
without
be
minds.
Logic and
okay. So without minds, not human minds, just without minds, there are no truths. Now that claim, okay, I'm not asking if the claim would be able to exist, but would it be true if there was no minds? I'm not asking if the claim would
No,
exist. That's
there's
so
no-
different.
there are no truths without minds. Period. That's it. Can you get to the contention? Can you get
There-
to where the
there-
inconsistency is?
There are no truths without minds.
Okay.
That's a truth claim.
Okay, with that I'm using my mind to come to. Okay, what's the problem?
Okay, but if it wouldn't be true, external to the claim, then it's ultimately unjustified to hold to.
Why is it
That's
unjustified? Why is it unjustified? Why is it unjustified?
Because that's ridiculous. You're saying that human mind. You're saying truth is dependent on a human mind. That's a truth claim, and that truth, if there was the claim itself, wouldn't be true if there was no human minds. I agree with you. The claim.
I'm sorry, Divine. I appreciate you, but this is getting way too crazy. come back with a more detailed argument. I'm sorry, what you just presented with us today was just ridiculous. I'm sorry. The biggest word salad. But yeah, come back another time when you actually have your more concise, condensed argument. Anyway, I'm tired, guys. Yeah, he's essentially saying, well, would a non-existent claim be true? That's by definition not possible. Okay. Political lives. Politics bores me. I hate politics. I know it's needed, but I just don't like it. It's boring to me. It's the same thing every day. Oh, Trump, Kamala, the border. That's just boring.